Hey everybody, how you doing? Steve Martirano here. A moment before we get into the nitty gritty here. Now, I got to remind you again. You will have our eternal gratitude if you just click that subscription button. We need your support in that fashion. Hit the button, subscribe. We'll love you long time here on the Behavioral Corner. Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martirano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. Hi, everybody. Welcome again to the Behavioral Corner with me, Steve Martirano. What we do here is hang. What else would you do on a corner? And we're fortunate in that we always run into some very interesting people, none more so than our guest today, about which in a moment. First of all, the whole thing is about behavioral health, and that's a big topic. It's all brought to you with the cooperation of Retreat Behavioral Health, our great underwriting partners. You know, we have lots of programs. We've done 2 years now of podcasts on a range of subjects, as I say, that cover behavioral health. We hope that you have found them informative and often entertaining and helpful. I would say, and the beauty of podcasting is that unlike radio or television in the old days, they don't just disappear. They sit on a shelf somewhere, in this case on our website, and it constitutes a library, a canon of what we've done. And I love that part about podcasting. I only mention that to you today because while we've done shows, as we say, on a range of topics affecting mental health and substance abuse, we have not done a series of programs on a topic as pressing as fentanyl. And that's what we are concluding, more or less, the series anyway, today with our second visit from Michael Gray. Michael Gray he was a successful businessman who lost a child to fentanyl, and he and other parents and family members in that condition started something called the Fentanyl Awareness Coalition. We've been talking about fentanyl for the past several episodes on the program. Just before we launch into our second and final portion with Michael, I would just urge you that if you have any time or inclination at all to educate yourself about a topic that is of critical importance to you, please go back to the Behavioral Corner website and check out our programs on the Fentanyl Awareness series. Michael, I'm sorry that took so long to set up, but welcome back to the corner.
No problem. Thanks for having me again, Steve.
Real quick on where we left things, because it's an enormous story and it takes a lot of time to tell. Michael does it better than most. We began with the current situation, some of its origins, and we'll hear more about that, and the devastating effect that this illicit drug is having on, and I mean this seriously, potentially everybody. And we left it there, the size of the problem, the cost, the dangers. Now Michael's back to us with the prescription. What do we do about this? Michael, first of all, real quickly, we're all in this together, correct?
Correct. Absolutely correct. All in this together.
Okay, so fentanyl is not your garden variety illicit substance. In other words, it's not something that's being cooked up in, little laboratories sprinkled throughout the country. This is an international problem involving foreign governments, as illicit drug trade always is. Is that where you begin with your prescription for what needs to be done on the international basis?
Yes and no, not primarily. That wouldn't be my primary solution. So let me sort of make the segue from last week, Steve, and talk about what we said about where the problem comes from and set up what I'm going to recommend as the most productive solutions that we can. Okay. So what did we say last time? We said that this is a chemical that was dropped on us in 2013 and created a new paradigm, right? And that new paradigm essentially was a higher death rate among the entire population that would use, right? Now, when it first came in 2013, it came in a form that displaced street, call it heroin, diacetylmorphine. And so it attacked and put a higher death rate to the 2 or 2.5 million people who use that form of drug in America under pretty deeply addicted processes of SUD and sort of chronic use. Then we saw the transition to where once the Mexican drug cartels got hold of it, they expanded the market by pressing pills to all the people who inappropriately use opioid pills in America, which is in the millions, tens of millions. And then they decided to expand it beyond opioid pills and all sorts of pills. And once you take any kind of pill that any kid is going to take at any kind of party, you're into probably 30 or 35 million Americans. Now, remember, there was a higher death rate that kept scaling into those market expansions. So when I talk about solutions, I want to set that up because I talk about a new paradigm. And the new paradigm is quantitative. I talked about it last time. It's all the additional death that's happening in a different way. It's not that the death rates of the same problem went up. That was only a minor contributor. Yes, more addicts, addicted people die from using opioids today than they did before 2013 because fentanyl is more deadly. But that would be a relatively small contribution, and we wouldn't even see ourselves in crisis if it stayed there. It was the expansion of the market to all of these people who don't use chronically, right? So to sum that up and to start for my solutions ideas, I'm going to use an analogy given to me of how we've handled this new opioid crisis that I call the new paradigm. And I'm going to use an analogy given to me by no other than Kenny Koza, your chief operating officer, who he and I have had these conversations at a very deep level. And he gave me this great analogy when I told him of how this problem goes. And I want to repeat it here. And it's this. Take suicide as a social problem. We have about 45,000 people who will commit suicide this year in America. It's about, call it 4,000 people a month will commit suicide. This is a problem in America, and it's a problem related to our population. For every so many people born, one of those people is going to kill themselves. It just locks in at population and grows that way all the time. So what is suicide? It's a problem of depression. It's a problem of depression leading to despair, leading to a belief that your life isn't worth it and you kill yourself, right? That's how we handle the problem. That's how we see the problem and we try to fix that problem. So who fixes that problem, Steve? Psychologists, psychiatrists, social scientists, right? That's who we empower and that's who we fund and that's who we turn to solve that problem for us in this country, or to at least mitigate and control that problem. Probably not solvable, okay, but hopefully controllable. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the act of killing yourself through a depressive disorder, right? We don't live in 15th century Japan. We don't have SEPCO going on. Right. People in America in 2022 who kill themselves are in a state of serious clinical depression, right?
Indeed, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's a 4,000 a month death rate, okay? Now, let's say that a foreign adversary decides to attack us in a non-conventional way tomorrow. Let's say Russia decides to do that. And let's say they decide to do it with the virus. Pretty interesting way to do a non-conventional warfare, wouldn't you say? And we have a lot of sensitivity to a virus coming from a foreign country now. Maybe yes, maybe no intentionally in that one, but let's say there is an intentional one by Russia. And the virus has an interesting way of getting into your brain and destroying your survival mechanism. And that virus, for 1% of everybody who gets infected within 48 hours, that part of their brain is eaten up to Swiss cheese and they kill themselves. They grab a gun, they grab a bottle of pills, they grab a rope, and done, kill themselves. And let's say it's 1% of all people who get infected. And all of a sudden, we've got 500,000 people a month taking their own life. So now our suicide, quote unquote, problem went from 4,000 to 504,000 in a month. Okay? We would call that a crisis, would we not? We would.
Indeed.
We would call it a crisis. We would panic. CNN would be on 24 hours a day talking about that virus. The White House would be having meetings. The Congress would be having meetings. Everybody there'd be a RSV, Russian suicide virus, czar put in place in the White. Okay, whole thing, right? So let's say we take all of that crisis energy and we put all of that into intense action. We fund $2 trillion. Reasonable money, since we put about $2 trillion into COVID, we put $2 trillion into this thing. And we take all that $2 trillion and all those resources and all that stuff that we marshaled as a country, and who do we give it to? Psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers. How do you think we're going to do?
Well, probably not well, since we weren't doing that well before. So who gets the money?
So who gets the money? Who should get the money? Virologists, epidemiologists, microbiologists, people who can solve virus problems. Because the Russian suicide virus is not suicide in the sense of depression leading to despair. It's a perfectly healthy person who got a hold of a virus and 2 days later killed themselves. But it's as if we took $2 trillion, all the funding for that crisis energy and all of the resources, and we gave it to the people who were presently dealing with a chronic problem that was stable.
Who are the experts in this case?
So here we go.
Yeah.
So we took a crisis of opioid death, built on the backs of kids who died in a one and done, take a fentanyl pill that looks like a Xanax at a party and die. We took all of the energy of that, which is now 110,000 kids a year. It's driving a lot of energy into this crisis we're looking at, we're talking about. And all of that energy is being given to whom? Rehabs, drug treatment counselors, people who have nothing to do with the deaths of the new paradigm. That's what I'm all about. So if I look at my new paradigm, the one and done kid taking a Xanax pill at a party, who is arguably half of the problem right now. And I look at the other half of the problem, the old paradigm kid who is operating under a substance use disorder and using chronically, who's going to run into fentanyl somewhere, or just overdose in a traditional sense at some point. If I look at those two problems, they are profoundly different as a depressed person killing themselves and a person with a virus that eats the survival part of their brain killing themselves. They both kill themselves. They both end up dead through self-destruction, but they're very different solutions. And a psychologist has nothing to tell me about a virus. And it's the virus that's the crisis. And it's the same thing here.
Okay, I'm going to play. This is what I get paid to do. I get paid to ask the dumb questions, and so I will. Let's stop and take a look at that. Are you saying that the emphasis and the funding on SUD is in conflict with the message of fentanyl and raising awareness about it? And how do those two aspects of the problem coexist? It sounds like a fight over money, or resources. Is that what you're saying?
No. It's not. It could be, and it might be, but someday, but it's not today. Mm-hmm. It's a fight over changing your paradigm perception. The new paradigm is a quantitative situation. That's what I showed you last week. That's what I just used in my analogy. It's a quantitative problem, but it's every bit as much a qualitative problem. If we think in the old paradigm, there's an old saying in marketing, Steve, that goes, if all I have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yep.
Right? And that's a way of saying people don't like new paradigms, okay? So if I'm banging nails all day long and somebody puts a screw in there, I don't want to think twice. I just want to bang at it like a nail.
Yeah, the thing about the paradigm shift, that you're right about it, one's resistance to it in a general sense, but it's also true that once you it's like looking at an optical illusion, and you're told, here's what, do you see a horse? And then they say there's something else and you don't see it. And then suddenly the horse is a house. There has been a profound shift in that vision. And that shift, once the shift is made, is very powerful, right? You're now going, oh, I see something completely different. You've laid it out very, very clearly in my mind.
But Steve, let me pick up on that point.
Yeah.
Never underestimate the power of groups of people to look at that house and believe it's a horse.
Yeah, I hear you.
And to continue to believe it's a horse when I continue to point out the rooms and the doors and the faucets and the electrical and say, house, 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 house. And they go, nope, horse, 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 horse. Never underestimate the power of people to live in an old paradigm, stick in it, and refuse to listen.
I think modern advertising and persuasive techniques, which spend in the private sector billions of dollars on, are evidence of that. It takes a while. If somebody is a Chevy guy, he ain't going to become a Ford guy unless Ford messes up. It's hard to change people's perceptions. You're right. I think, though, through groups like Fentanyl Awareness Coalition, and now some of this is bubbling up into the mainstream media. They're not pussyfooting around. Recent articles on fentanyl's dangers in places like the New York Times talk about poisoning. They're moving it. They're shifting the paradigm, maybe too slowly. Who? Let's get to specifically who those people are in the best position to make sure we understand that things have changed. I'm thinking about the role of big pharma, the advertising industry, the insurance industry, drugstore chains, and certainly the government. Are they all part of the army that will change this perception?
Yes, but I think it's simpler than that. I think it's every man, woman, and child in America. Full stop. That's where we have to get to. My wife got angry during the COVID when she looked at the TV one day and she said, 6 months into COVID, every man, woman, and child in America knows social distance, wear a mask, wash your hands. She said, why are we 6 years into an opioid crisis, killing kids in the suburbs, and nobody knows the 3 things about fentanyl they should know? What's wrong with this picture? It's a worse crisis. It doesn't kill people with 2.6 comorbidities who are 79 years old like COVID did. It kills people who are 20 years old who have a whole future and a great productive life before them in society. This is a worse crisis. And yet, 6 months into COVID, wash your hands, social distance, wear a mask. 6 years into this crisis, you ever seen me on TV? I'm not on TV. Nobody wants to hear this message.
Where is you mentioned Ken Koza, our underwriting partner from Retreat, and he and I have a couple of conversations on this, and we both kind of said, where are the public service announcements funded? First of all, they shouldn't cost a lot of money because, as last I checked, it was a requirement of broadcasters that you run public service announcements. And where are they? Because, for instance, the pharmaceutical industry has a vested interest in pointing out that they produce legitimate drugs. And now they are being compromised by counterfeit drugs that probably contain a often lethal dose of this illegal substance. Why aren't they on television and in newspapers saying, if you didn't buy it, if you didn't get it from a physician and have the prescription filled at our pharmacies, don't take it because you're at risk? Where is that campaign?
Well, first of all, when you talk about pharma, they're in a uniquely powerful position in America. They don't care. They don't want to hear my message. It's of no interest to them whatsoever. Right now, there's a lightning rod called Purdue, and everybody's jumping on that. And we're going to hang those people from the light posts, and that's going to make us all feel better. And it ain't going to change a thing because Abbott's not getting into it, and J&J's not getting into it, and Sanofi. None of these companies are going to get into this and give me the billions of dollars that they should to promote that idea. They're not going to do it. Why? Because we've created a lightning rod for them. It's taken all the negative press, and it's all Purdue, and nothing's blown back on them. So forget them. They're not going to help.
Well, so I want to just push back on that because it's in their best interest. If I were the manufacturer of something and it was highly lucrative, and suddenly one day somebody started counterfeiting it and selling it, even if it wasn't killing my customers with the nature of the product, I would still go, wait a minute, you're degrading my legitimate product with your inferior counterfeit. Why wouldn't they have an automatic self-interest in telling people, don't buy that, it's fake? Why wouldn't they automatically have that?
I'll offer the suggestion that the reason is right now they are cleared of this. When you go in the hospital tomorrow for surgery and they're giving you drugs, you're not asking questions. The doctor's using what he's using. And he knows that the fentanyl that he uses is made properly, and it's made by a pharmaceutical company, and it's dosing properly. And he's got all the equipment in that hospital to keep you good if anything goes wrong. And he's perfectly comfortable with that fentanyl, and his comfort passes to you and you're comfortable with it. You think the last thing I want to do if I'm the pharma industry is start advertising that problem so that people come to a hospital panicked about that word. It's the last thing they want to do. And it doesn't affect them now. Remember, the one thing that will at least won't happen in the foreseeable future in America, when we talk counterfeit, Steve, when you talk counterfeit, okay? And counterfeits, I've done a lot of counterfeit detection work in my life, from everything from handbags to pharmaceuticals to semiconductor devices, okay? And there's some common elements in how you fight counterfeiting. One of the things you have to remember is that we don't have any counterfeit in our legit supply stream. So fentanyl that's made for medical purposes is made by pharma companies, shipped by pharma wholesalers into hospitals and doctors' offices, and used by them appropriately. Virtually none, statistically, none of that stuff gets into the illicit supply stream. This is a whole different supply stream out of chemical companies in China and now Mexican cartels in Mexico that has nothing to do, and that fentanyl will never in the foreseeable future will not find its way into CVS in a bottle that you thought was Percocet. Ain't going to happen. Okay. So if I'm on the pharma industry, my supply chain is clean, it's tight, it's good, everything's fine. I don't care about that other dimension. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to move on from this because I know you have other things you want to send you, but I'm just wondering in the final analysis about the big pharma's role in this thing. Does the episode where Tylenol's products were tampered with give us any guide on what might happen should big pharma get alarmed? As we know, somebody tampered with some amount of Tylenol on shelves of drugstores, and people died. And I don't know who made Tylenol, but they swept right in because their self-interest was now the whole stock had been threatened. It wasn't really, but in the public's mind, there was a danger of using Tylenol, and they pretty much saved that product and that brand by being, all hands on deck. And let's tell people, I'm not saying big pharma is responsible for the illicit use of this drug, but when you're the legitimate manufacturer of Xanax or even Oxycontin, legitimate, and somebody's making a counterfeit of it, that's hurting my product. And I think they have a vested interest. They ought to be out in front talking about this. Don't buy it unless we made it.
Yeah, I of course I believe the same thing. They don't, and they won't, because it doesn't affect them. You're talking about a difference with Tylenol. 1982 Tylenol killer killed 7 people in the greater Chicago area. Okay. And that was a true poisoning. I use that example to draw the difference between overdose and poisoning, because what happened to my daughter and the thousands I represent was not an overdose. It was a deceptive poisoning, just like the 82 killings with Tylenol. But the key to Tylenol is it's over-the-counter drug. This is in the controlled substances regulated market. That fentanyl that's happening in these pills, these Xanax pills, it coming out of Mexico, it's so far removed from the pharma companies. So, but let me get to the solutions, because I'm talking about the pharma companies because honestly, I think we're barking up the wrong tree. So if you look at my 2 paradigms, the old paradigm that still exists, the addiction paradigm of somebody using chronically under substance use disorder, and over the course of statistically 8 years, they lose their survival instinct and one day take too much because the high means more than their life and they die. That's the old paradigm drug overdose problem. That's still out there and it needs to be dealt with and it needs to be handled. And thanks be to God, we've got all kinds of people a lot smarter than me working on that problem. Wonderful. And we've got probably $1 trillion a year of economic activity throughout the country focused on that problem. Okay. Now we got a new paradigm. The one and done kid at a party who takes that pill that was pressed by a Mexican drug cartel. Okay. We've had no time to react to it because it all happened in about the space of 3 years in America. We went from one situation to another situation. A society can't absorb that change that fast. So here we are with these one and done kids, the new paradigm. So I ask you the question, if 100% of our resource and energy is focused on treatment, MAT, addiction understanding and research, needle exchange programs, and all those other things, what's that doing for the lacrosse playing 3.8 GPA kid who's going to college in the fall, who goes to a party in the summer or 2 parties or 3 parties in the summer, decides to do a little bit of fun recreational drug and gets killed on a Xanax pill? No rehab's helping that kid. No MAT's helping that kid. No needle exchange helping that kid. We're doing nothing for that kid. As a society, we have not lifted our finger for what is now arguably more than half of the problem. Okay, so what's the solution? So let's first start with these 2 problems are totally different. So why would you ever expect the same solution? The old definition of insanity, keep doing the same thing I'm doing and expect different results? Yeah. Okay, so what makes them the same? What makes them different? What can we leverage off what we've already done for the last 100 years about the substance abuse problem? What can we learn from that? And then what do we have to learn for the new paradigm? Why am I so obsessed with getting everybody to understand this new paradigm? Because you can't come to solutions until you do. And it's not as simple as saying, oh, that kid who was an innocent kid or appeared to be an innocent kid. We've been saying that for years. That kid gets addictions too. Yeah. It's not about that. That's not the part of the dynamic I'm talking about in my new paradigm. So let's talk. What do they share? So let's boil right down to the solution. What do they share?
Yep.
They share the fact that if we can stop the illicit fentanyl from getting to the people on the street, fewer people will die. fewer addicts will die, fewer one and dones will die, and fewer of everybody on the gray scale in between will die. Fewer people will die if we can get less fentanyl on the street. So what they share is the supply side restrictive practices. Law enforcement, interdiction, border control, import controls, all of that stuff, right? They share the need to restrict this stuff as much as we can. Good news, this is not medical fentanyl finding its way to the street. That's pretty well cleaned up and that's pretty safe. That's the good news because it's all coming from one place now. It's all coming from the southern border and it's all right there in one place to try to stop it. I'm not going to get into border politics. That's not what I do. You're not going to stop it at the border completely anyway. So that's not where I focus my energies. Okay. Should we control our border? Of course we should control our border. You know, did Trump control it better than Biden? I don't get into those things. We should control our border to some extent. So both will benefit from less fentanyl on the street. So all that we're doing in law enforcement and narco squads and the DEA and the ONDCP and all those other things we're doing on that supply side control, keep doing them, do more of them, right? Keep doing them. But that's only a minimal effect, especially in the case of fentanyl, because there's no way you'd have to put a steel wall from side to side to stop that stuff. It's too small.
Yeah, and interdiction has not, let's face it, has not done a tremendous, not that we should not try even harder, but stopping the flow wherever it's coming from has historically been, fingers in the dike. So it's made much harder by a drug that can be smuggled so easily. Right. And in fact, mailed in. A lot of it comes by traditional delivery services. But I get your point. So the supply side is important. And that's going to take, obviously, governmental.
But that's the efforts. One they share, Steve. But that's,
clearly.
In both my old paradigm and new paradigm, they share that need, but it's minimal impact on either one. As you said, we couldn't control the border with heroin where it used to be a pallet that's now shrunk to a brick. I mean, forget it. I mean, you're not going to stop it that way. That's okay. But we should do it, but we shouldn't expect that to be the solution. So now I'm going to give you the solution to the new paradigm. What's the solution to the old paradigm? More research on addiction, more rehab facilities, more MAT, newer novel MAT drugs, all of those things, because addiction's a very complicated brain science and we need to understand it better, right? So everything we're doing on that side, old paradigm, we need to keep doing so that's why I say they're not in conflict at all, because they're two different problems that are coexisting. And I'm all for all the solutions for the one problem. I'm just not for the fact that there are no solutions for this problem, which is the crisis part of the problem. Remember, addiction until 2013 and through today is a very controlled situation. It doesn't go into crisis. It never changes. That's what my data shows. It's the one and done kit, the Xanax pill to party, that is the crisis.
Sure.
That's the death that came from nowhere and is surging.
It's sort of the difference between taking all of your attention and resources and focus on the issue of fire prevention and no money or attention on putting out a fire.
Right.
The fire's burning and all the money's being spent on Smokey the Bear saying, only you can prevent forest fires. I get it. So what's the next thing? Interdiction, supply side?
You must be hanging around with Kenny because you just blew me away with a better analogy. And if you don't mind, I'm going to take it and use it. It's so much easier than my Russian suicide virus thing. And it says the same point. Right. We're not, we sold all the fire trucks and put the money into Smokey the Bear commercials. So now when a fire does happen, we put out the fire.
Kenny's a sharp guy, but that one's mine.
Oh man, you're a genius. I love it. Okay. So now let's get to the solution. What's my solution? What's my equivalent of MAT and rehab and research into addiction? It's so unbelievably simple. Here's the issue, and I'll tell you where I came to my solution. There's a guy by the name of Kemp Chester, who's a deputy director at the ONDCP, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the director of whom, Dr. Gupta, is known as the quote-unquote drug czar. Okay, I work a lot with that office. And filled with good people who really care. In fact, at our upcoming event at Retreat, Jim Carroll will be our keynote speaker, who was the ONDCP director under Donald Trump. So we're very close that off. So Kemp says to me one day, they're very, very focused on addiction, right? And Kemp says to me one day, Michael, I'm really thinking what we need to be doing in this office is communicating to like 5-year-old kids, because it's in kindergarten and that 5 and 6, first grade, where the behavioral patterns start to show that are going to lead to a trajectory of substance abuse in their teen years. And we want to see if we can get in and correct those directions then. Boy, that's brilliant, I said, Kemp. I said, it's really, I can't applaud greater that kind of thinking, to go lower and lower into the realm. Okay. But at the same time, it made me realize something. You couldn't have come up with a better way to draw the distinction of the old paradigm, new paradigm solutions, because you should add that to the rehabs, to the MAT, to all the things you're doing for the old paradigm. That's a powerful addition to it. But in my side, the new paradigm, I don't care what happened to that kid at 5 years old. I don't care what happened to that kid at 12 years old. I don't care what happened to that kid 12 hours ago. So here's the key to the solution, Steve. The new paradigm kid is making a decision in the moment, with no preparation, with no indicators, with no warning signs, right? By the time a kid overdoses in the old paradigm, he has probably been in trouble with drugs. He or she has probably been in trouble with drugs for 10 years. It's probably 10 years since their first excessive partying, or that prescription that started them, or the depression that started them, whatever. It's probably 10 years to the day they die. The kid who does the one Xanax pill at a party, the only indicator of what was going to happen to that kid started when someone next to him opened a bag and said, I got some pills, let's take them. Probably 45 seconds before he died. That's the first moment that his death and the process leading to it ever comes on the scene to be dealt with.
What do you do? I understand that there is a time frame situation here, which you've just described, but we changed the attitude overwhelmingly of young people and the population in general about cigarette smoking and its health hazard. It took a generation. It took 20, 25 years before cigarettes were considered unsafe. And as a young person, be smart. Don't pick up this habit. We don't have the luxury of that time, as you just said, with regard to that moment when a kid's going out to a concert and somebody says, hey, I got some ecstasy, have one. How do we get ahead of that moment? So in that moment, he knows, wait a minute, I don't know what this is. I'll pass. How do we get there? I got it.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Finish my sentence for me, please.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a sentence that's all over the place in popular culture, and I'm going to ask you to finish it, the last 2 words. Ready?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
15 minutes could save you 15% on?
Oh, that's the life insurance pitch. Right? No, the insurance.
Right.
15 minutes could send you. Yeah, I get it. Go ahead.
15 minutes could save you 15% on car insurance.
That's it. Yeah.
And the fact that it took me a minute to get you to come around to the car means you need to get out more. Okay. So there's only one person who's ever utterly failed that question. And I told him, Mike is his name. And I said, Mike, you got to get out more. That's really scary. You must be living in a cave all by yourself. Okay. So why do I bring that phrase? Because I want to explain something. That is the advertising campaign of Geico.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about what they did over the past, it's got to be 15 years now, something like that. They've done all these different strains of advertising that all rolled up to that phrase. Mm-hmm. There were the cavemen, remember?
Sure.
The guy who's half motorcycle, half man, the gecko, of course, right? But all of those things were in service of that phrase. And let me explain, because I'm a marketing guy. Let me explain what that phrase is. See, Geico sells a unique kind of product. They're not potato chips. They're not soft drink that you buy routinely each week, so that if I can bombard you with advertisements about the good taste of my potato chips or my soft drink, when you're at the supermarket this week, you're going to have that message in your mind, you're going to buy my stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's how traditional advertising works. Geico's got a unique product. Most of us only interact in our car insurance life a very discrete number of times in our life. 99% of your life, your car insurance is just that bill that's out there that you pay.
It's such an appropriate analogy because you're exactly right. Insurance, whether it's car or life or house, homeowners, is a product you buy and hope you never have to use. So something like an impulse about it is eliminated. You know that you need this, even if you never have to use it, you should have it. As a marketing,
the key is your decision process, because you only come to it at discrete moments in your life. When?
Exactly.
When you have a car accident and someone raises your rates or gives you bad service. When you get a new rate change and your rates went up. You got a speeding ticket and your rates went up. Okay? It's only in those half a dozen or 10 moments throughout your entire life you go into a consumer, a discretionary consumer mode relative to car insurance. The rest of your life, it's just the bill you pay.
Right.
Well, Geico realizes every time they put a TV commercial on, you're not going to the supermarket Friday to buy their product. So they can't do that traditional, we're just better, keep that in mind for the next 3 days and buy more of us, right? So what they came up with was a phrase that they so super saturated into the culture that it became a seed in your brain to be cracked open at that point in your life when you're coming to your crossroads on car insurance. 3 months from now, 2 years from now, 18 months from now, whatever that is. And whatever the thing that led Steve to make a car insurance choice, they want to put a seed in the brain that will crack open at that point. Okay? Now, what's the one they all share? When I say your speeding ticket, your accident, your new rate sheet, whatever, what do they all share? You're not in a good mood. You're frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
You're upset. You're probably upset at the cost. So what is the key to that seed? 15 minutes could save you 15%. I just got $1,000 increase. Might only be 850 on Geico.
It's absolutely right. So who shapes that message? Who shapes
here we go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me finish out that explanation now. Here we go. So when a kid is making a choice to take that pill,
yep.
I'm not talking about the chronic user who uses the dope like potato chips every single day. I'm talking about the kid who's going to make this decision very likely one time in his life, or maybe 5 or 6 times in their life. Okay? They're going to make a decision in the moment. I have to find a way to be with them in the moment. So what do? I look at Geico. I come up with a 15 minutes type phrase that I super saturate into the country, not the kid, into everybody.
Yep.
Geico saturates 15 minutes could save you 15% into 11-year-olds who don't buy car insurance because they have to saturate into everyone for it to be effective. So big question. If I go to the Martin Agency of Richmond, Virginia, and I ask them who did that campaign, what was the budget? What was the final number budget over the course of all that time so that Steve could tell Michael car insurance? Probably $15 billion.
Oh, okay? Easily.
Okay, well, there you go. So that's what I need. I need $15 billion, and I need to go sign up at the Martin Agency of Virginia and say, do exactly for the opioid crisis what you did for Geico. I want that seed in every American kid's brain so that when they get to the party. Now, what did I say, Steve? The common element of all your car insurance decision was what? Disappointment at the price, frustration at the price.
Yep.
Guess what? All of my one and dones, they have a common element too. You know what it is?
Guys.
Indecision.
No.
At that moment, they're wondering whether they're going to take that pill. And some part of them is telling them no. I know it is. Okay?
Yeah.
I need to crack open a seed that will move them 2 degrees over to no and keep them off that pill.
Interesting.
The only solution.
Yeah, it is. That's why, I began at the beginning, and it was not in this context, but wondering, well, who has a vested interest in driving that message? And I'm telling you, I don't know why we can't compel the pharmaceutical company to get involved in this. I don't know why insurance companies don't say, look, if you want us to protect your interest, that you're going to take, you're a stakeholder, you're going to have to drive this message. I think there are a lot of people with resources and hopefully some imagination who should get right on board on this, because you're right. There is no margin of error here. I see an image in my head of someone putting a bullet in the chamber of a gun and spinning the gun and then holding it to their head and clicking it, and somehow immediately saying, this is a dumb thing to do. We need to get that message out. So kids can really break things down simply. They'll take risks and they'll be thrill seekers. They'll do all that stuff. It's part of being young. But I think generally they won't do things, most of them, profoundly stupid, where they know that that's a loser. That's the message you're talking about. That's what the paradigm shift should be about, making people know the stakes are this high, correct?
Yes. I had a disagreement recently. I'll put another little facet on this thing. Mm-hmm. I had a disagreement recently with someone here who's a very, very big name here in New York, where I am, in the rehab addiction sort of treatment community. And we were talking about doing PSAs. And I was suggesting that we needed 2 PSAs, one for the old paradigm kid, one for the new paradigm kid. And he said, no, we don't. He says, Michael, you're trying to create a bifurcation. I'm paraphrasing what he said. You're trying to create a bifurcation that doesn't exist. There's a whole gray area. Kids use drugs for a whole bunch of reasons. They're a little shy. They're a little awkward. They have serious psychological problems, to whatever else. They're in an abusive situation. And I said to him, the problem between the difference between you and me, aside from the fact that you live in an echo chamber where you make your living and I don't, but the difference between you and me is this. You assume that every time a kid takes a non-prescribed drug of some sort and ingests it, that they're working out of some kind of psychological deficiency or defect or disorder. Mm-hmm. See, I don't think that.
Nope.
I think that a kid who takes a Xanax pill at a party or a Percocet pill at a party, you know what that kid is? That kid is a young kid doing something stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
And what do young people do better than anything else? Stupid stuff.
Stupid stuff. You know what, Michael? Michael, it's so incredible. This came up in an earlier conversation with some of the people, some of your colleagues at the Fentanyl Coalition, and that is with regard to the pills or anything. We've told kids for years, going back to when I was a child, lies about drugs. We lied about, marijuana will turn you into a maniac. And, if you did acid, you'll jump off of a building. We were lied to. And no matter what parents told us growing up, as a general rule, kids generally go, that ain't true. Let me try it and find out for myself. Then, if that weren't bad enough, lying to them, we began telling them that their behavior could be changed at a very early age if you just take this Adderall. Right. So now, I see. So some of these drugs are good and some are not so good at an early age. Now he's 18 years old, 17 years old. And the message is, don't take that drug. Don't take that drug. And wait a minute, what are you talking about? You've been lying to me for my whole life about this stuff.
Exactly. Right? And by the way, mom takes Xanax with a glass of wine every time she has a fight with dad. Absolutely.
Mother's little helper. Listen, that song is 60 years old. So when you say get the message, your friend is wrong. There are 2 messages. We know that substance abusers have real problems. They are long-term and they need help. They're not going away. They know the message, by the way. They know better than anybody there's a problem. The crowd you're talking about, the much bigger, the one that's dropping like flies tragically, they need a different.
Is the crisis.
Yeah, they need a different message. And that message is a tough nut to crack because of what you just described. We've been lying about this stuff too long to these kids. They don't believe us half the time. And now when they absolutely have to believe us, we got to figure out a way to get the message.
So let's go full cycle to where I started with that analogy again. So the overdose problem stemming from SUD is the suicide problem. It's stable, it's controlled, it grows at a rate. We try to do all we can to reduce it. It's not something you can eliminate because it's deep in the psyche of the country. Okay, and that's been there forever. We then suddenly had a new type of death that sent the data skyrocketing. That, by example, was the Russian suicide virus, which the people who try to control the deaths by overdose or by suicide, who are psychologists, can't do anything about a virus. In our example, that first group is a stable group that's controlled by therapists and counselors and drug treatment people. The new group that's dying, who needs to solve their problem? Who's the virologist, epidemiologist of this one? Geico. I mean, like literally like an advertising agency to do, because that's the only thing we can do. The decisions in the moment. We have to find a way to get into the moment. Let me give you one more example. There's a guy, I don't know, he hasn't given me approval to use his name yet. He's a very, very prominent guy in the world of college wrestling that I'm very into. And he told me yesterday he's a very intense athletic guy. He was an athlete as a kid, now he's an announcer. I don't want to use his name because I haven't got that permission. I think he'd be okay with it though. But what he told me is when he heard my new paradigm, he's like, Michael, I got to tell you something. 20 years ago, when I was a kid in my 20s, I went to a concert and I was a straight arrow. I didn't drink. I didn't do drugs in high school. But after high school, I started drinking a little bit. Went to a concert, had a few beers. Somebody hands me a pill. And he goes, and I had a few beers. My inhibitions were lowered. And he goes, I looked at the pill and I thought, oh, I might just take that. Stuffed it in my pocket, but I forgot it was there. Wake up the next morning, not drunk, not tipsy anymore. Pull that pill in my pocket. Ooh, that was bad. It flushed down the toilet. Okay. He goes, but now I see what you're saying. The difference between me taking that pill and not taking that pill was infinitesimal. It couldn't be measured. And he goes, but then he finishes the story this way. Remember, he's a tough guy athlete, right? Didn't do any drugs his whole life, right? Mm-hmm. And to this day, he says, I've never taken an illicit pill because I didn't take that one, right? This is the guy he is, a clean guy, right? Tough guy, athlete. Right. Right. And he says, not only was I that close to taking it, he goes, I bet you, thinking of myself as I was back then, if 6 hours earlier, this is really the key part of the story. If 6 hours earlier, you had said to me that you thought I was the kind of guy who'd take an ecstasy pill, I would have punched you in the face. Okay? That's what I mean about a decision in the moment. Mm-hmm. If I gave that guy my message 6 hours earlier, it goes nowhere. Because 6 hours earlier, he thought he was a guy that if you suggested he'd take that, he'd punch you in the face. 6 hours later, he's looking at his hand going, maybe.
Michael Gray, the Fentanyl Awareness Coalition. When we talked about this with Retreat, they asked if we could do a series of these programs on the corner. I had to get up to speed. I knew what fentanyl was, but I was operating under the old paradigm, and I went, well, maybe these people are exaggerating this situation. Let me do. And I've read some stuff. I've read a Brookings Institute study on dealing with China over this. I've read a couple of things now, and certainly talking to you. This is a profound shift, and there's nothing particularly controversial about it. It's just getting people to see what is and not what they think is. And to go back to an earlier suggestion, you guys are in the forefront of talking about something very simple, which is, and we'll use the fire analogy again. Sure, you should have smoke alarms in your house, but they don't do you much good if the house is on fire. So fentanyl, and we're calling this series on the corner, the poisoning of America. And that's exactly what it is. And you're just at the beginning of your effort. And I applaud it. As I said, go listen to the other interviews we've done with Michael's other parents who've lost people, and maybe you'll get an understanding of how critical this is. Michael, we can talk about this.
Statement before we go?
I'm going to give you the last statement for sure.
A lot of what I do and talk about, people think that we dismiss the problem of addiction, and we don't.
No. Mm-hmm.
I have come to know many people under substance use disorder in this work I do. I have to tell you that these are the most beautiful, wonderful, loving people in the world. The group that came to my daughter's funeral, who she knew, friends of hers, people she was befriended, they cared more about her almost than anybody there. These are wonderful people. We care about this problem. It's not what we're fighting against, but we have so many people fighting against it. So I just want to close with one statement. My daughter, Amanda, who knew the people at Retreat very well. It's her cousin that works there. I mean, she loved the people there very well. And she had a thing she would say to people when she was trying to help them. And I just want them all to hear that. Anybody suffering under a substance use disorder right now, and you think your life is out of control, and you think that there's no future, and you think it's never going to be okay, my daughter would always say to you, you are so worth it. Mm-hmm. I have yet to meet any of these kids who aren't so worth it. We need you in this world. We want you in this world. Please, please understand how important you are and do the hard work to get yourself clean so that you can feel the joy that the rest of us feel.
Yeah, we also need people like you, Michael. You and others paid a terrific price to get to the point that we're at. We acknowledge that loss, although you don't dwell on it. And congratulate you and thank you, as a matter of fact, for alerting us to things have changed, and we gotta get up to speed on it. Fentanyl Awareness Coalition. There's some work being done on their website. I think you can still go to it and get an idea of what they're doing. Michael, I'll see you in Florida, I think, for the retreat.
June 23rd.
On June 23rd.
We'll be there.
And I thank you so much for these interviews and for the people you have turned us on to tell us the story of the poisoning of America by fentanyl. Michael Gray, thanks so much, bud.
Thank you so much, Steve. Goodbye.
And guys, thank you. Don't forget, it's all there in our catalog, all these stories on the Behavioral Corner. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
Retreat Behavioral Health has proudly been serving the community for over 10 years. Here at Retreat, we believe in the power of connection and quality care. We offer comprehensive, holistic, and compassionate treatment from industry-leading experts. Call 855-802-6600 or visit us at www.retreatbehavioralhealth.com to begin your journey today.
That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.